the electrical code does not specify a height requirement from the floor to the center of the box for commercial or industrial applications. This is a common point of confusion, especially when considering residential installations, which often have specific height requirements for receptacle outlets. In commercial and industrial settings, the primary focus is on accessibility and safety rather than a fixed height from the floor. Several factors influence the placement of electrical boxes in these environments. Firstly, the intended use of the receptacle or device plays a crucial role. For example, receptacles intended for specific equipment may need to be placed at a height that is convenient for connecting that equipment. This is often determined by the equipment manufacturer's recommendations or the specific needs of the application. Secondly, the presence of obstructions or other equipment can also impact the placement of electrical boxes. In industrial settings, machinery, piping, and other infrastructure may necessitate placing boxes at a certain height to avoid interference or damage. Similarly, in commercial buildings, architectural features or interior design considerations may influence the location of electrical boxes. Thirdly, accessibility is a key factor in determining the height of electrical boxes. The code requires that electrical equipment be readily accessible for maintenance and repair. This means that boxes should be placed at a height that allows workers to easily reach and work on the wiring and devices within the box. In some cases, this may necessitate the use of ladders or scaffolding, but the general principle is to ensure that the equipment can be accessed safely and efficiently. Fourthly, the type of wiring method used can also affect the placement of electrical boxes. For example, if conduit is being used to run wiring to the box, the conduit may need to be supported at certain intervals, which can influence the height and location of the box. Similarly, if cable is being used, the cable must be properly secured and supported, which can also affect the placement of the box. Fifthly, safety considerations are paramount when determining the height of electrical boxes. Boxes should be placed in a location where they are protected from physical damage and accidental contact. In industrial settings, this may mean placing boxes higher up on walls or ceilings to avoid being struck by forklifts or other equipment. In commercial buildings, boxes may need to be placed in recessed locations or behind protective covers to prevent tampering or vandalism. Sixthly, local codes and regulations may also impose specific requirements for the placement of electrical boxes. It is important to check with the local electrical inspector to ensure that all installations comply with the applicable codes. These codes may vary depending on the jurisdiction and the type of occupancy. Seventhly, the Americans with Disabilities Act, or ADA, also influences the placement of electrical receptacles, though that mostly pertains to ensuring easy access for individuals with disabilities and may affect accessible routes and locations. Eighthly, while there isn't a specific height requirement, the general principle is to ensure that the electrical box is placed in a location that is safe, accessible, and convenient for its intended use. This requires careful consideration of all the factors mentioned above, as well as any other relevant site-specific conditions. Ninthly, it's also important to ensure that the electrical box is properly supported and secured. The box should be mounted to a solid surface using appropriate fasteners. The wiring within the box should be properly terminated and secured to prevent loose connections or shorts. Tenthly, regular inspections and maintenance are essential to ensure that electrical boxes remain in good condition and are functioning properly. This includes checking for loose connections, damaged wiring, and any signs of corrosion or water damage. Any issues should be addressed promptly to prevent electrical hazards. In summary, while there is no specific height requirement from the floor to the center of the box for commercial or industrial applications, several factors influence the placement of electrical boxes in these environments. These factors include the intended use of the receptacle or device, the presence of obstructions or other equipment, accessibility, the type of wiring method used, safety considerations, and local codes and regulations. Careful consideration of these factors is essential to ensure that electrical boxes are placed in a location that is safe, accessible, and convenient for their intended use. Always consult with a qualified electrician or electrical inspector to ensure that all installations comply with the applicable codes and regulations. This will help to prevent electrical hazards and ensure the safety of workers and occupants. Furthermore, it is important to remember that electrical work can be dangerous. Only qualified electricians should perform electrical installations and repairs. Working with electricity requires specialized knowledge and skills, and it is essential to follow all safety precautions to prevent electrical shock or fire. If you are not a qualified electrician, it is always best to hire a professional to perform any electrical work. This will ensure that the work is done safely and correctly, and that it complies with all applicable codes and regulations. In addition to the factors mentioned above, it is also important to consider the long-term needs of the facility when determining the placement of electrical boxes. As the facility's needs change over time, it may be necessary to add or relocate electrical boxes. Therefore, it is important to plan ahead and ensure that there is sufficient capacity in the electrical system to accommodate future needs. This may involve installing additional conduits or panels, or upsizing existing wiring. By planning ahead, you can avoid costly and disruptive electrical upgrades in the future. In conclusion, the placement of electrical boxes in commercial and industrial settings is a complex process that requires careful consideration of many factors. While there is no specific height requirement from the floor to the center of the box, it is important to ensure that the boxes are placed in a location that is safe, accessible, and convenient for their intended use. Always consult with a qualified electrician or electrical inspector to ensure that all installations comply with the applicable codes and regulations. This will help to prevent electrical hazards and ensure the safety of workers and occupants. The absence of a specific height requirement does not mean that the placement is arbitrary. It necessitates a more thoughtful and considered approach, taking into account the specific needs and constraints of the environment. Electrical installations are a critical component of any building and should be treated with the utmost care and attention to detail.